Hi guys, welcome back. Today my final project is going to be over how dating reality TV messages and their audiences interact and how those interactions relate back to our class. So the first thing is, what concepts can we use to even relate these weird, unpredictable shows to our course? So the four topics I want to touch on are listed here. The history of media, meaning that The Bachelor was the first TV show of its kind. Social responsibility being how audiences take a moral stand and say that certain messages are more constructive for society than others. And that's from chapter 2. And niche audiences being, of course, productions catering to certain types of audiences, and then selling their attention to advertisers, like how the experts talked about in The Social Dilemma. And then cross-vehicle and cross-media promotion come from chapter 4. Cross-vehicle promotion being, so we'll take the network ABC, for example. ABC hosts both The Bachelor and Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy Kimmel will often appear on episodes of The Bachelor, and the Bachelor and Bachelorette couples will often appear on Jimmy Kimmel Live. And then lastly, we'll talk about where these shows are going as far as the life cycle of media and what stage they're in. So let's look at some examples of where these concepts show up. The first concept we talked about was the history of media. I'd like to draw some comparisons between The Bachelor and one of the earliest dating shows, The Dating Game, from the 1970s when color TV became very popular. The Dating Game is a show where a single woman would ask questions with three men that she couldn't see. They were separated by a wall, and at the end she would pick one to go on a date with. And The Bachelorette kind of put this idea on steroids. Around 30 single men or women sign up to date one man or woman. Each week there's a rose ceremony where leads choose which contestants he or she wants to continue to see, and the rest are sent home. This goes on for around 2 months of production until there are 2 contestants remaining and the lead picks one to get engaged to. It definitely put this idea of competitive dating in a short time frame really on a big platform when it premiered in 2002. Steve Martin actually appeared on The Dating Game, and soon after his career in film took off. A similar thing happens on The Bachelor and Bachelorette, where contestants go on to gain a big following, so to speak, and launch their own careers or even become the next Bachelor or Bachelorette if they're not selected. And then moving into social responsibility and niche audiences, this show primarily features white contestants and leads. In fact, in 2016, Splinter News reported that in the history of the franchise, on both The Bachelor and Bachelorette, Black contestants have never lasted longer than 5 weeks. In fact, 59% of Black contestants leave the show within 2 weeks of the premiere, which is really unfortunate. It just feels like a grab just to try to include Black people just to say you did it, but really not give it the platform it deserves. And then the show is primarily watched by young, middle to upper class white women, which perpetuates a lot of this lack of inclusion. So this young lady right here is Rachel Lindsay. When her season premiered in 2017, weekly ratings actually dropped from 16 million to 5 million in the United States, which is unfortunate because she's actually a success story from the franchise. She is actually married to her husband now, who is white. They were also an interracial relationship, and it's crazy that nobody wanted to watch just for that fact. So she took to her podcast over the summer after the Black Lives Matter movement really sparked and called out the franchise for their lack of inclusion and even threatened to separate herself from the franchise if they didn't get their act together. Not long after, the show took to Instagram to announce the next Bachelor, which is weird because they announced this guy before the current Bachelorette even premiered her season. So while I'm applauding them for making this choice, it feels like a knee-jerk reaction that they were just forced into it and they didn't actually want to do it, which is really disappointing to see. So here are all the Bachelor, this guy makes me laugh. Here are all the Bachelor leads in the history of the show. This gentleman here, his name is Juan. He is from Venezuela. But if you look at the rest of these men, there's not very many differences, except this guy is really blonde. And then here we see all of the leads. This is Miss Rachel Lindsay, again, who is one of the only of these women to still be in a relationship with someone they met on the show. Then we had Hannah Brown, who had a few Black men on her season. Claire Crawley is this season's Bachelorette, and she has quite a few on her season. She actually picked out with an African American contestant after getting engaged after 3 weeks on the show. And now Miss Tasha Adams has taken her spot and continues to have several people of color on her season as contestants. So going back to who the majority of the audience is, young, middle to upper class white women, unfortunately, there is this habit that young white women in America fall into of slut shaming. They did so when Caitlin Bristow engaged in intimate relationships with a contestant 5-ish weeks into filming, and she experienced quite a bit of backlash from that. And I'll show a clip. Which is really upsetting that this double standard still exists, because it's not uncommon that the leads, whether they're male or female, kiss more than one person in a night, because when you're on group dates, you're trying to get that one-on-one time. So you're going from one-on-one to one-on-one and building a connection. Apologies for the language. They did a good job censoring it because this was live. But luckily, it seems as though the narrative is changing. 4 years later, Hannah Brown started her season. She was actually slut shamed by a contestant. She sent him home, and she was actually praised by viewers after the fact for standing true to being a grown, consenting adult who was building connections on Fantasy Suite Week, where the whole point is to kind of build that physical connection. So it's important to pay attention to the language here in this clip. So this gentleman, Luke, is going to tell Hannah what she should and shouldn't be doing in her relationships. She's shocked. So she's very hurt by that. She sends him home, and he shames her religiously for it, and said she's not a true Christian. Many took to social media to praise her behavior. So I'm glad to see that this narrative and social responsibility is changing for the better, and eliminating this double standard that men can do whatever they want intimately, but women cannot. So, and then another social responsibility, the final aspect, is that the show has only had one same-sex couple featured on their show. They are unfortunately no longer together, but a lot of the Gen X audience did not receive this well. I hope to see more same-sex couples in the future. I think they're missing out on targeting a younger Gen Z or millennial audience by not featuring LGBTQ leads and contestants. And then moving into promotion, this gentleman is Colton. He was the lead and ended up going home with Cassie. And they went on Jimmy Kimmel Live after the show had aired to talk about their experience. Now, at one point, Cassie threatens to actually leave the show because she doesn't know that she's ready for an engagement. And Colton abandons the scene and jumps the fence. This clip was put all over social media, featured on Good Morning America countless times to try to get people to tune in to see what all the fuss was about. So obviously there's some dramatic lighting, hikes up his pants, and jumps. That's also my favorite Chris Harrison quote. So they used that to their advantage to spark some debate on what the moment was going to be. What's the future of the genre, kind of moving into the life cycle of media? The show has roughly 4 spin-offs from the original Bachelor and Bachelorette that hopefully will be more inclusive as they continue. But some other shows that do a really good job are 90 Day Fiancé, featuring worldwide relationships and different cultures and religions. Love Island is pretty similar to The Bachelor, but they are better at having diverse cast members. And Too Hot to Handle kind of goes back to that slut-shaming narrative and kind of helping people get over their fear of commitment and straying from more intimate relationships to general healthy both romantic and friendship relationships. And then my final exam question is, how many leads of color have been featured on the show? And the answer is 3. Here are the names, so I'll leave this up for a second if you want to take a picture. Otherwise, thanks for a great semester, Mr. Berglund. I hope to see you guys in other classes.